we thankfully found some of our notes for the Kenobi Timeline, which we were telling you about.
Yeah, so the Kenobi Timeline. Can you guys, just first of all, I'll introduce myself. This is Chris. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by the Brothers Krynn, and you guys were with us a few episodes ago talking about the Star Wars universe and just an interview for you guys. So check that out if you haven't already. But why don't you guys just reintroduce yourselves again, just so for anyone that hasn't listened.
Well, we're the Brothers Krynn. We're a pretty medium-sized, I guess, Substack over...
Huge. Just kidding.
Thank you. Huge, I guess. You flatter us. Substack devoted to fiction, mostly fantasy fiction, on Substack, and we write mostly serials and short stories, but we also publish, I guess you could say, lit and film analysis stuff, such as about Star Wars, Disney, Gallivant, music. We analyze just about anything that catches our eye, and that stuff generally we use to support our fiction, so that we hook people in with the lit analysis of more popular stuff than our own, and then we try to get those people to read our stuff.
You've been doing a good job of that. You got me hooked in. One thing you left out is that you guys are GOT Game of Thrones haters.
Oh, that's sorry.
No, don't apologize. I'll have to say that I'm a fan of Game of Thrones, but I've read your critiques and I don't really have much to disagree with on them. I know that we're going on a tangent here. I was about to reply to your last post, the one having to do with Game of Thrones and fascism. It was really fascinating. I don't really have a lot to disagree with. I might have to reread with the lens that you've given, but that has been fun. I think the critique has been interesting because I don't hear that anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah, we generally are pretty critical and harsh with Martin, mostly because his work doesn't appeal to us due to the postmodernist themes and whatnot. But that being said, we have the philosophy, love what you love, and for example, with Game of Thrones, I like the history of the small baronial houses, like the Blackwoods and whatnot. I find them fascinating. I think Martin did a great job with that aspect of world building. But I think where he failed was the plot, I guess you'd say.
Well, the idea of, you guys said it could have been a murder mystery, right? It could have stayed that way, or they could have leaned into it more. But then it concluded in the first book, right? The mystery was not solved. The mystery went on for a while, but it wasn't a central theme, right?
Well, yeah, and I think it should have ended with maybe the execution of Cersei and Littlefinger, and then what you could have had was, in the next book, Ned Stark has to crack some sort of murder mystery over on the home of the Lannisters. I forget its name. Casterly Rock. He could have gone there and cracked a mystery there. And, just have these kind of murder mysteries for 6-7 books. And then if you want a war story, you then use the world building from that series to write a war story.
Yeah, the war story was really pretty quickly it got to being a war story. And one thing that I find interesting is that you talk about it as being Machiavellian, which I'm sure that there's a lot of people call it Machiavellian, but I think of Ned as a lion, and the Lannisters as foxes, and in the Machiavellian tradition, that means a lion is someone that wants to use brute force.
I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I guess. I don't think too deeply on the Game of Thrones stuff because, like I said, it's not like Lord of the Rings or Silmarillion or Hour of the Dragon where it's something that fascinates and grips me. But yeah, I guess a lion or a wolf is a good comparison, and then you have the little foxes that nip away at the heels of this larger animal. Mm-hmm. Ned Stark, the trouble is that he's stupid in the books. Like, the way he's written, he's supposed to be an idiot. Now, the murder mystery, with that aspect, he's written really well as a fairly intelligent guy when he's hunting for whodunit. But the trouble is that Martin needs him to be an idiot so that he can fall for, Cersei's little trick, which is not even a trick. He falls on his own sword, really. And this is the thing. All of Martin's heroes fall for cheap tricks and stupid tricks. If you're to compare it to Star Wars, for example, I've heard it said that Mace, Obi-Wan, the other Jedi were stupid in the prequels. Because, they let Palpatine outsmart them. Well, if you actually think about it, and if you read the EU, they kind of caught on to Palpatine. Like, 6 to 7 months before the end of the war. They kind of caught on. But the trouble was figuring out what to do about it. You know what I mean? Like, well, it's one thing to say, well, I'm just going to walk in, I'm going to dethrone the Supreme Chancellor. Yeah, but they know that there's a secret passage leading from his place to the works where there's a temple of the Sith. So, what if the Sith Lord's nearby? That's what they were thinking. They didn't know if Palpatine was the Sith Lord. That's a worst case scenario. If he is, okay, you have a Sith Lord who's the Supreme Chancellor, but really dictator. How do you deal with this problem? And, from a legal standpoint, how do you keep from getting iced? You know what I mean? Because the Senate's not going to take it well when the Jedi dethrone Palpatine. The people might not take it very well. And you also got to bear in mind, there are Jedi within the ranks, like Yoda and Anakin, who are more loyal to the Chancellor than to the Jedi. So, you've got this could split the order. This could really... So, Mace, Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, and Ki-Adi-Mundi, they're sitting on this info and they're going, what do we do? And they keep proposing, we got to do something. But remember, Yoda pretty much has a controlling veto. So you can't do anything without his real permission. It's not that he exactly has a veto, but, he kind of has one. So, and the trouble is, Yoda wields incredible influence over the Council. So, it's one thing to investigate and prove Palpatine's a traitor. Now you actually have to get the political support to do it. And we got to bear in mind, politics sadly infected and tainted the High Council of the Jedi as well. So that you essentially had Windu's faction and Yoda's faction. And this is where the Jedi are really kind of caught. Now, contrary to what a lot of fans might think, Obi-Wan was firmly in the Windu faction. Obi-Wan was firmly on Windu's side, because Obi-Wan himself wanted reforms within the Jedi Order that Yoda was not willing to effect. Such as the whole no attachment rule. Obi-Wan hated that rule. And with good reason. So, it basically neutered the Jedi. So, yeah, Ned's situation is very different from, say, the Jedi. Ned knows the Lannisters are guilty. He has the political support. He just does the stupid thing that no one else would do. No one in their right mind would do. Goes to the enemy and sells out info, basically sells himself out. I can't understand the logic. But the thing is, this is what heroes do in Game of Thrones. They kill themselves, stupidly. You look at, Robb Stark. He's shooting down all the messenger ravens between the north and the south. So he knows there's going to be a red wedding. He knows. But then magically he doesn't know at the last minute. There's no way he doesn't know. So how does it happen? Why does he walk into the trap? I don't understand. So, whereas with the Jedi, it's not like they're trying to walk into a trap. It's just kind of, they're trapped because of the High Council's division. And this is where we have to give Palpatine quite a bit of credit. It's divided, we fall. United we stand, divided we fall. At no point have the Sith ever been able to beat the Jedi until the Jedi are divided. When the Jedi are united, they could kick the Sith's rear easy. Heck, even with only one Jedi left in the galaxy, they could kick the Sith's can across the road all day long. But, I don't know what you think of that kind of analysis.
I don't disagree. Yeah. I think the thing that I have a hard time overcoming is the part with Ned, him he did go to the enemy and tell them that he knew, and that was stupid. Like, that's just no way to really... Yeah. It was honorable, but stupid.
Well, how is it honorable? I think it's dishonorable. The man told his kids...
Didn't he... I mean, wasn't his intention honorable, though?
I have no idea what his intention was.
Well, he told them that, hey, I know the jig is up here. I know that this is not... Your heir is not legitimate. I know that you are... you'll be hanged if this information comes out, so I'm giving you a chance to leave the capital. And wasn't that his idea of being honorable?
Well, maybe, but why would he even do that? I can't think of a single honorable man in history who would ever do that. Honor historically tends to make men smarter, not dumber. And the trouble is, Robert would not have killed the kids. Robert is gentle at his core. And Ned knows this. But Ned doesn't believe in him and doesn't even like him deep down. So... that's where, or at least I can't think of any friend who'd think of their friend the way Ned does. So, I guess in my view, it's just, I don't understand the behavior. Shouldn't he not give a warning and instead basically let them get caught and basically catch them and then tell Robert, can we have a bit of mercy here? Because he wields incredible influence over Robert. If he says, listen, you're not killing them, Robert's going to say, okay. No, Robert will immediately go, okay, I won't. Yeah. And Tywin, who's a coward and is afraid of Robert, will go, oh boy, Robert's still alive. Oh my gosh, I'm not fighting him. I'm going to go back to Castle Rock and I'm going to beg. That's what's going to happen. Ned knows that. Everyone knows that. But for some reason, the plot requires Ned Unit 1.5 to go to the Cersei unit and tell her, I say unit because they're acting like robots. No human being would behave the way Ned did there. And I'm very harsh with the story, and I'm probably being harsher than I should be. But that said, I think that's all I really think about it, I guess.
Yeah, and it makes, if you look at then his two children making a lot of the same mistakes too. And they were the quote-unquote, the hero, right? The stereo or the prototypical hero, the one that wants to do good. And, of course, they're the ones that are always doing the stupidest things.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, it's the postmodernist view, right?
Yeah, but, hey, love what you love. But,
yeah.
I'm serious. I'm not here to dictate to anyone what to think or how to think. I don't have that right. But what I think is even cooler than Game of Thrones is our fanfic idea, Kenobi Timeline, which we spent too many years just sitting on, so that we can't really write it anymore. But we've written a few chapters, and then we ended up making notes for other stories and plots within it. The first prologue was so badly written because it was written when we were really much younger. But I'll just introduce the story that gave rise to the idea, okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Jude Watson, in the early 2000s, published a novel called Secrets of the Jedi, where she analyzed... Well, she showed the love lives of 3 generations of Jedi. You had Qui-Gon Jinn, who had fallen in love with Tal. Tal was a Jedi master from Jedi Apprentice, who was a mother figure to Obi-Wan. And her and Qui-Gon kind of had a thing. And the thing is, Tal was blinded, but in the mission when she was blinded, Obi-Wan chose the mission over Tal. And part of Qui-Gon never forgave Obi-Wan for that, because he was deeply bitter about it, and would accuse Obi-Wan of being a traitor for months afterwards. And Tal, for her part, was proud of Obi-Wan, because to her mind, the mission came before her. She had a personality a lot like Obi-Wan. So she eventually pushed Qui-Gon to forgive Obi-Wan, and basically told him, I'll never forgive you if you hold anything against Obi-Wan. Between the two of us, if it's a choice between you or him, I'm choosing him every time. And she made it clear that had Qui-Gon not taken him as a Padawan, she probably would have. So there was a very, very close bond between Obi-Wan and her. And Obi-Wan himself, in a few books, compared her to a mother. And that he never really had a mother, except maybe Tahlon Yaddle, who was more of a granny, because she's Yoda's race, but more grandmotherly. But the thing is, Obi-Wan developed some mommy issues. Some. But he also has some daddy issues, because Qui-Gon Jinn sometimes ran hot and cold with people. This was how he ran with his relationship with Tal. He'd reach out, pull back. Reach out, pull back. He did this with Obi-Wan, he did this with Yoda, he did this with Tal. It's just Qui-Gon was pretty much abused when he was a Padawan by Dooku, at least psychologically. And, this affected him for the remainder of his life. But the thing is, Qui-Gon eventually confessed his feelings to Tal. She was murdered. He nearly turned to the dark side. Obi-Wan and Tal's spirit managed to pull him back from the brink. But the trouble was, for the next few years, Qui-Gon Jinn was not the same. He was a broken man. And he became very codependent, but he refused to take the lead on any mission. His self-confidence was shattered. Obi-Wan Kenobi had to take the lead on every mission. So essentially, Obi-Wan became the master and had to behave like it. Obi-Wan probably could have passed the trials at 18, or at least 17, but he didn't, because he had to take care of his master. He had to babysit. But the thing is, in Secrets of the Jedi, Obi-Wan at 18 years old falls in love with Siri, who is 2 years his junior. Siri and Obi-Wan had been very bitter rivals as children. But then, when Obi-Wan was 13 and she 11, they went on a mission together and they started to bond. Then Siri helped rescue Qui-Gon Jinn alongside Obi-Wan from the most evil scientist in Star Wars history, and actually one of the most evil bounty hunters as well. So, the thing is, they formed a bit of a weird friendship over the years, and they often went on missions together. And then at 18 and her 16, the two of them are separated from their masters, fall in love, and decide to keep their relationship secret. But then Qui-Gon Jinn finds out, is enraged, and reports them to Yoda, who basically threatens to kick them out if they will not break up, and then they forcibly break them up. But both of them are left broken individuals. They're shattered. And the thing is, Qui-Gon then has kind of buyer's remorse, realizing, oh my gosh, I broke my Padawan. Psychologically, he's broken. He can't do anything anymore. He's semi-catatonic. He's not exactly catatonic, actually, but basically Obi-Wan regressed a little in skill and in whatnot, because he couldn't bear it anymore. And then he became increasingly bitter and began to say things like, another useless life form. To him, people weren't people anymore. They were useless life forms. Qui-Gon did this to him. And Qui-Gon realized what he had done wrong. But he couldn't fix it. But then the two became ever further apart, ever more distant. Because Qui-Gon was jealous of the bond Obi-Wan shared with Tal, and Obi-Wan was kind of bitter towards Qui-Gon for breaking him and Siri up. But then they fixed the relationship, really, in Episode 1. On Yoda's end, Yoda was just very happy to have broken up a couple, because to him, this is God's work. And, this is what he's been put on Earth to do. He doesn't, it's his hobby. But every time Yoda does it, people end up broken. And some Jedi in a few books, like Mace Windu, have told him, knock it off, you're breaking our people. You're not helping us. You're actually damaging our people, and then they basically go commit suicide, which has happened. Or they go off on suicide missions. Stop doing this, you're not helping us. Can you please knock it off? And Yoda doesn't. So what you have is a situation in Secrets of the Jedi which is disastrous. Then you have Obi-Wan observing, in the next generation, Padme and Anakin's relationship. Within a week or two, he clues in, realizes it, but decides to cover it up. And the thing is, every Jedi worth his salt knows, but they can't risk losing the chosen one. And the problem is, Padme is not very bright, so of course, her and Anakin are a little sloppy and don't cover their trails properly. So Obi-Wan is doing that for them. But Siri dies on that mission at the end of Secrets of the Jedi. And Obi-Wan, who has had an on-again, off-again relationship with her after the death of Qui-Gon, because, Dad died, might as well get back together with the ex. But the thing is, Obi-Wan loses her and is essentially a bit of a widow now. Rather than going to Obi-Wan's side to care for him, like a good pious son should, Anakin decides to go have fun time with Padme. And this is where Jude Watson proposes that there's a moral failure in Anakin and Padme's relationship. That's passion, not love. And that with Obi-Wan and Sili, even though Obi-Wan had a very deep bond with Sili, he still tried to help Qui-Gon when Qui-Gon needed healing after Tal's death. So that she proposes that, at least as a thesis almost within the book, the strongest relationship at its core was Sili and Obi-Wan, in contrast to Qui-Gon, Anakin, and Padme and whatnot. Now, the idea of the Kenobi timeline was spun from, well, what if Obi-Wan and Sili were not caught? But then the idea came, well, that's boring. Basically nothing changes in the timeline. Same thing happens. But we threw a monkey wrench in there, or at least our oldest brother did, and his proposal was, what if there was an accident baby? Well, how does this screw up their lives? Well, obviously it's going to screw them up. But the thing is, Sili had an undercover mission for a pirate called Crane. And the idea was that this would take place roughly before her departure. So she'd have time to have the child in secret and whatnot. Now, the plan Sili and Obi-Wan decided to concoct, we figured would fit in thematically with how the child would turn out. The child would end up, as an adult, being inspired more by Sherlock Holmes than anything. Because Obi-Wan was the Jedi Apprentice series and the Jedi Quest series were more mystery novels. And that's what we liked about Obi-Wan a little more. So you have episode 2 with him and the mystery of Kamino. So we decided that we would rather have a Sherlock character, but a cheerful one. Because Sili has a bit of a cheerful, positive outlook on the universe. But a pragmatic one. She's very sweet and kind, but she's rough around the edges. Think a female version of Anakin. She's impulsive, hot-headed, and sharp-tongued like Anakin. And has the same wit.
Okay.
But she's got, think Leia. She's also got like Leia.
Sure.
But the idea was this would be more a Sherlockian character. But he would not be a Gary Stu. So, as a bladesman, Anakin would always remain a step up ahead. Talon's role would be to play second fiddle to Anakin at all times. And therein would lie his tragedy. Because the idea would be that he'd be a tragic character. He'd be born, Obi-Wan and Sili would have to scramble to hide the truth. Now, what do you do with such a child? Neither Obi-Wan nor Sili know any other life than that of a Jedi. So in the prologue, they kind of debate the idea, and they pass it back and forth, and they conclude, we couldn't survive without the Jedi Order. And not being part of it would break us, but we can't just ditch the kid. What would we do with the kid? Well, their solution is, Obi-Wan has a brother called Owen Kenobi, and we decided that, the writers decided, well, if Owen Kenobi was never found on Coruscant, we'll just say that he relocated to Korrilik for a job there. So what they did was they infiltrated the DNA lab, or at least the DNA files within the Jedi Order, and they hacked it, or at least Obi-Wan did, and the archives to alter it so that Talon would be in the records the biological son of his brother, so that they'd pretend that this child is a Kenobi, because they can't completely hide it, but he's born from a different lineage of Kenobi. But the idea was they then give up the child for the Jedi Order. And this way they'll get to keep the kid around. Naturally, there's risks involved, and it's incredibly impulsive and a foolish plan. So, of course, it's Sili's plan. I'm joking. But the idea was, however, that from the word go, this child would exhibit greater force potential than his parents. Obviously. But never near the level of Anakin. And he's far more powerful than his father, but far weaker than Anakin. The other problem was...
Why is it obvious that the child would be stronger?
Well, it's obvious because when two force sensitives get together, the next generation is usually stronger.
Yeah, I figured that would be your answer, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, it's because they share midichlorians.
Right.
And the midichlorians... Because, typically, midichlorians don't go with a let's say 2,000 plus 2,000 equals 0. It doesn't usually happen. It occasionally happens. But typically it's, let's say, you get Obi-Wan who's got, I think, 18 to 19,000. Well, the child will have probably a slight bump up from, Obi-Wan and Siri. Now, Anakin had over 20,000. But we know for a fact that the ancient Sith Lords were far stronger. They could shatter entire star systems with the Force like that. So they must have had way higher midichlorian.
Right.
Than 20,000. But in the movie era, the Jedi and the Sith have weakened over 1,000 years. They can't do the same godlike feats they could in ancient times. Like Nagasato could when he just shattered a star just for, like, when he was already wounded and weakened. So, on the other hand, Anakin must remain the strongest of this era, at least until Luke and Leia come along, and Kyle Katarn. So, we gotta play with that. So, Anakin's midichlorians, I think last checked, was rose to 23 or 25,000 in Episode 3. It went from 20 from when he was 9, and it increased. And Obi-Wan obviously increased from something I think 16 or 17,000 up to 19,000 for his Force bond with Anakin. So Anakin had a positive effect on him. Force bonds increase your Force sensitivity. And your parents and whatnot, and that bond further increases. Tahlon, the idea was he'd be quite a bit below Anakin, but as an adult, a full-grown man, if Anakin's at 23 or 25,000, Tahlon might be at 20 or 21,000. He's well above Yoda. He has probably more potential. Same with Ferris Olin from the canonical Last of the Jedi series. I say canonical, but expanded universe. So we got to play with the idea. Tahlon is somehow around the Ferris Olin level, but nowhere near the Anakin level. He's not allowed to be near there. So these are the strict guidelines we have.
No, they'll sound good because you don't want to. It wouldn't be right to have someone stronger than Anakin. So that's a rule for your story. I support it.
Yeah,
it wouldn't make a lot of sense. I had a quick question though before we move on, if you don't mind. I just was I feel like most fans can see why the relationships for Jedi could be detrimental, kind of like a priest, right? Like priests don't marry. It's because they're married to God, or right? I mean, essentially.
I'll be honest. Oh, sorry for interrupting.
But go ahead. I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, Catholic priests used to marry. It's not till a few centuries ago that they were barred from marriage.
Okay.
I never understood the rule.
Seems to be odd to me.
Yeah, because since we barred priests from marriage, there's been so many sex scandals. The solution to me seems simple. Let them marry. But
I do agree with you.
But on the other hand, in Star Wars, the Jedi have usually been allowed to marry. It's not till really Yoda that he banned it completely. Before that, the Jedi were allowed, but usually you had to consult with the Council. You just had to get Dad's permission, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want permission to marry this person. With Jolie Bindo. And Jolie was told no. Dude, Nayama's, she's got crazy eyes. We don't want her near you.
We did our psyche valve, and we don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
not a match we want to have.
Yeah, Anakin would not have passed with Padme. No way, Jose. No way.
So I think most fans assume that this has been an entrenched rule, but that's new to me. That it was a Yoda invention, or at least a new, I don't know, reform.
Yeah, it's occasionally been banned over the centuries. It's a rule the Jedi played with sometimes. Rook, for example, and Nomi's Sunrider banned it, even though Nomi had some affairs over the years with, let's say, Eula Queldroma. So it's pretty hypocritical for her to ban it. But, some Jedi banned it on occasion. Odon did not, but you needed to consult, from what I understand. Now, some Jedi banned it, some didn't. So it's been an on-off rule over the millennia. It's Luke who said, I'm banning the rule entirely. No more of this. We're going back to, you have to consult with Dad, but, come on, I'll probably say yes. And he generally did. Luke was a good, fair-minded guy. Our mentality was, we gotta prop up the canonical heroes. And the thing is, Siri will still die in the Clone Wars at the same date and time that she does. It's just there's an extra person around for her to, when she dies, her son. So that's our mentality. Like, Shmi will still die. Everything will still play out the way it does for the most part. There's just some expanded universe stuff that's going to be a little different.
Right.
And our mentality was the attachment rule will stick with. Tahlon will not be the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Like, Obi-Wan, Mace, Anakin, they could kick his can all across the road. Like, they gotta kick our characters' rear. Like, he's not gonna be the strongest. He has potential, but he's not gonna reach it.
But then that makes him have to have other ways of figuring things out, right?
Yep. That being said, how we start the story with him was when we wrote the first real chapter with him, we began with him at 1 year old and climbed all the way up till he was about 6. Because when he's about 6 years old, episode 1 happens. And the idea was the name he's given is one that immediately strikes Qui-Gon Jinn, because the name chosen is Tahlon, but we spelt it with T-A-H-L, which is the, like, Obi's mommy figure, her name, with O-N afterwards, Tahlon. So that this child is quite literally named after Obi-Wan's maternal figure. So there's a nod there. I don't know what you think of that idea.
Oh, I like it.
Okay, because we kind of felt there has to be nods, there has to be respect paid, and we want the... Like, Talon's destiny is just to be kind of a baby bro to Anakin. Like, he's just there to basically be a fanboy. But he's also there to kind of be a best friend, but lend more tragedy to Darth Vader, in a way. And the thing is, with Tahlon Kenobi, is that he's someone who, in a way, is disinherited by his parents due to basically inconvenience. But they also wanted him close by. The first real argument as a couple between Obi-Wan and Siri is that of who gets to train him when he comes of age at around 11 or 13. And it's a topic they never fully fix, really. Both wanted him, but, to actually live out those years as father and son or mother and son. But episode 1 happens. Now, this young child is, of course, discovered at around, I think it's 3 years old. I'm just scrolling through the notes. Well, for one thing, Yoda, of course, takes notice of him. And Tahlon quickly gets Yoda's kind of liking, because Yoda thinks he's kind of adorable. Because I'll just quickly find one exchange. Now, we did have a few characters, because we gave Tahlon a support cast. Like, there's a Wookiee Padawan called Gurion. There's a few friends of his. Maleria Stardust from Tatooine, and her friend Mikran, named after a Mikran son in X-Men. We just thought that'd be a cool nod.
Nice.
Yeah, and Mikran, though, is a dark lighter. We felt we needed a dark lighter in there. And Stardust, of course, it sounds like something from Tatooine. So we felt this is a good nod to Anakin, and it would show, but the idea would be that these were moisture farmers who were free and gave their kids up for Jedi training.
Okay.
Which did occasionally happen. But for Tahlon, one of his first questions is, because he's told, the lightsaber is not a weapon. It's not a toy. It's art and an extension of the Jedi. It's as alive as its wielder. So what Initiate Kenobi wonders is that disrespectful or not? Like, he's wondering, should we call it he or she? And he's really kind of wandering blind. And of course, most of the kids want their lightsabers to be a he, because it'd be cooler then. But the trouble is, Yoda then decides this whole thing's funny and kind of makes fun of them a little. Then, you get like Tahlon who complains, I would kind of like a yellow one. But of course, as a Jedi, he'll never wield a yellow lightsaber. But he's like, I kind of want a yellow one. So we just felt these are 3-year-olds, so they're going to be kind of differently than what we adults would. And this is the lesson that Qui-Gon Jinn wanders in on and overhears. And when he realizes this boy's a Kenobi and has kind of his ex's name, he's kind of floored. Of course, I know most fans would say he'd immediately clue in. We decided he doesn't. But, at least on a conscious level, he doesn't. But on an unconscious level, he does. So he starts to gravitate to this young boy. Qui-Gon Jinn starts to keep watch over the child. And
I suppose a part of the reason why, another reason why is like, he's named after my ex that I loved so much. Oh, she would so love him.
yeah.
That nostalgia, those emotions, they would block
And
aspects of his cynicism and his questioning.
well, it's also because he's grieving. Like, he's still in the grieving process. Like, the man lost the woman he loved for he's loved her since he was 3 himself. And he's in his 50s. He's never known how to live without her.
Right.
So, yeah. Sorry, what was that, Chris?
No, I just said right.
Yeah, so that was our thinking. We were not looking at him as a stupid character, as a stupid individual, but more as a human being, I guess. I don't know what you think of that.
No, I think it's touching. I mean, it's just a good way to show, there's a bit of conflict within Obi-Wan. He's not just spiteful. Like, there's other aspects to him.
Yeah, because Qui-Gon Jinn, I've been harsh on him in a few essays, but he's actually a very kind man. He was kind to Anakin. He was kind to Celia. He was kind to Bant at times. No, yeah, he was kind to Bant all the time. But Celia's sometimes kind and unkind too. Because, daughter-in-law, father-in-law, it doesn't always work. But he is kind to her a lot of the time. Even funny. The two of them crack a few good jokes together in Jedi Apprentice. The thing is, kind is the word I would describe Qui-Gon Jinn as. The problem is, Qui-Gon suffers a lot and kind of takes Obi-Wan Kenobi for granted at times. And we all do this. And the idea with Tahlon, for example, was that at 4 years old, he would end up getting... Now, the idea was he shared the same hobby Qui-Gon Jinn and Tal did at one point when they were young, from what I understand. I think they like to go into the Room of a Thousand Fountains and pick up rocks from the seabed in that fake lake. Tahlon liked doing that with his Twi'lek friend Yvek Laba. And, of course, she's nicknamed Yvek. This is short. The trouble with the two is that a couple of kids take the rocks, they get into a fight, and someone throws the rock, and it hits Mikran, the blonde-haired girl from Tatooine, the Dark Lighter. She starts crying, runs off, and we had the funniest little exchange from... we wrote this part from the 4-year-old Melira Stardust, who reacts with a great deal of rage. That's it. Who tossed that rock? I'm going to Criffin kill the mother Criffin Shuta. And she's 4 years old and she has a potty mouth. No, wait, I just noticed another note. She's about 7 years old at this point. No, she's about 2-3 years older than Tahlon. Never mind, my mistake. So she's about Anakin's age. She's the same age as Anakin, and she has a potty mouth. And she's been raised by the Jedi her entire life. So she starts beating the snot out of some of the other kids. Because it's the thing to do. But, of course, a couple of masters are called in, including Sindralig. He appears in the Episode 3 video game, and we decide to include him. And he's kind of plenty mad, because he's kind of looking at this and going, why do I have a brawl in the middle of the Room of a Thousand Fountains amongst the 7-year-olds? Seriously. No, you're not allowed to do that. And the thing is, Mikran, of course, went shrieking, running off to the medical bay. And Melira, that when she realizes her best friend kind of ran off screaming, crying, she freaks out and then races off to the medical bay, feeling terrible. We put this little child drama in there just for fun. It amused us.
Sometimes you need these icebreakers.
Yeah, because the thing is, the Star Wars story is very dark, so we thought, throw in a bit of comedy here. And we, of course, had Yvette, and who tries to find her rock, doesn't. Tahlon keeps searching after Dark when he's not supposed to, having snuck out of his room to do so. And he's caught by Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan kind of initially dismisses this. It's like a child's fight, and that is all. That's his reaction. Like, it's just a couple of rocks. That's why you're frantic here. This is where we gave Qui-Gon Jinn a line. Obi-Wan, it is no simple matter. This may be a child's feud over a few rocks. However, it is as great in importance in life as the squabbling of a few petty senators. More, if you ask me. The last part was grumbled out before he added more lightly. Perhaps the young lad would care for our assistance in this great matter. And this is where we showed one key difference between Obi-Wan, like around the time of Episode 1, and Qui-Gon Jinn, because we wanted to keep the characters the same. Obi-Wan has a deeply cynical side. To him, a kid loses a couple of rocks, even if it's his own kid, he kind of has the attitude, so what? That's how he was initially with Anakin, and this was a problem in his relationship with Anakin Skywalker. And Anakin needed a bit more support in some ways, not, kind of well, come on, dude, it's just a couple of rocks, or it's just a couple of droid parts. He needed Obi-Wan to level with him. You know what I mean? Because Qui-Gon would have. Qui-Gon is someone who's not always a good father, but he's a great grandpa, and he's a great uncle. He's a really good uncle, he's a really good grandfather, just not always the best dad, not always the easiest dad to get along with. But he can be a good one. So we wanted to take a bit of a middle path between the two. Obi-Wan feels terrible, because when Obi-Wan makes mistakes like this, he always feels bad for it. And then he tries to correct it. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan help Tahlon find the rock, and Tahlon makes friends with Mikran. And we put in the comedy, of course, because Dan was teaching, I think, little girls at the time, and little boys at the time. And we put in a little incident that kind of happened with one of his students, I think, where it's, you have to sit beside me at all times, to her best friend. And that's what Malira says to Mikran later. Okay, come on. This is the last offer I'm ever going to make to you. You have to sit beside... Okay, you can sit beside those other people, and not me this one time, but, final offer here. Final offer. Like, little girls do that. So
even when you're dealing with 7 or 8-year-old boys, it was a pair of boys that did that.
Oh, okay. I got that all mixed up then. But we decided that 2 little girls should do that. But we put in a telling line for Mikran. What was it? Now she's asked. Well, Mikran just says she'll be back in 5 minutes. She can never last. And Yvette asks her why. And Mikran says, because we're best friends forever, no matter what. Kids have that logic, and there's a wisdom to them, and in their simplicity and whatnot. But the other idea was Mikran and Malira, when we wrote this, we kind of went, okay, we're going to need to use these characters later. So we created a bit of a larger support cast, and we decided we're going to use these secondary characters later as background characters, and give them their own plot lines and their own tragedies and whatnot. They're, of course, going to die, because, they have to, or at least Malira has to. But the thing is, a lot of these characters will die. We gave, for example, Tahlon, who's put in a higher grade class in lightsaber because he proves himself quite talented, and he's getting personal lessons from Obi-Wan, who is doting on him a little too much. And the idea was that, for example, because the problem is, in the EU, most writers don't really delve into those of Anakin's age group. So we had to fill up the age group so that Anakin would interact with more than just Tahlon. So we threw in a character called Fergus Feld, and then we got caught up in, what's his family destiny? What's his family like? We got into the question of who would Talon's clones be? Who would Malira's clones be? Who would Mikran's clones be? What kind of interests do they develop? And but we didn't want them all to be the same Jedi. So we had like Mikran wants to be a, what was it? I think, oh right, she wants to be a school teacher. Melira wants to be a medic later, and Fergus wants to be a blades master. But ultimately, we also wanted to tell more than just the same story, so we also had, like, Fergus is chosen by a Jedi Master who's fairly abusive towards his Padawans, kind of like Dooku was. Because these sort of Jedi were cropping up. Dooku was... well, the thing is, Dooku was a bit of a pattern. But the Padawans don't have any means of kind of reporting their masters to an extent. And the mentality we had, though, was, on the other hand, Yoda would be highly sensitive to these things and would want help. And this would be a way of trying to showcase Yoda's kindness. So, you know, like, the idea was to use these characters to show the different aspects of the canon characters. To develop them, show more of Lucas's characters. So, like, we're still at the prologue bit. So, like, at 6 years old, Tahlon, after episode 1 takes place, would feel rather bitter about the loss of Qui-Gon Jinn, because he really loved Qui-Gon. And the last memory he had of Qui-Gon was the two basically going on a park bench on a small excursion and eating essentially ice cream. But Tahlon loses him, and Tahlon thought that he had a surefire shoo-in as Obi-Wan's Padawan. Well, his options for masters went from Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Silly to now just Obi-Wan and Silly. Oh wait, Obi-Wan chose Anakin. Now he's only got Silly. So the trouble is Silly's off on some long-term mission. So we have here Talon's options, which have suddenly shrunk to 0. So suddenly he's feeling the panic. He's feeling the, he's fearful of the Rule of 13, which was a terrible rule on Yoda's part. He should never have instituted it. It was cruel. But the thing is, Talon's starting to fear that. So he, at about 6 years old, humiliates Anakin in Anakin's first lightsaber class. And the idea was Obi-Wan and Yoda would kind of scold him, and Talon wouldn't like it. But the idea was that, on the other hand, Talon had done this unkind thing to Anakin. So what happens is that Talon's feeling jealous. Anakin, though, at about 9 years old, is already showing the habit he'll later have in the Jedi Quest books, where he'll sneak out of the temple to go get droid parts, because he just has the urge to find his own droid parts, because this is his. He needs possessions. He's been in possession of someone else's entire life. He needs to own something. Who could blame him? And Anakin sneaks off out of the temple, brings droid parts into the temple, and starts putting them together and cobbling them together. Talon follows him, wanting to prove, I don't know what, at about 6 or 7. Like, I'm better than him. He gets into trouble with a gangster, because it's a disreputable part of town. Anakin smooth talks and rescues the boy. This shows Anakin's street smarts and Anakin's ability to, his goodness. Because even though Talon was an a-hole to Anakin, Anakin still has it in him to want to help Talon. Because Anakin at his core is a good person. And that's where our view was Anakin would do that. And in that case, after that, Talon is touched because he realizes, this kid saved him when he treated him like garbage. So, and as the years start to progress and Anakin catches up to and surpasses his peers in the Force and in lightsaber skill, Talon kind of comes to admire him and revere him. And we did write a scene, I won't get too much into it, where the two are watching the stars together and vow to visit them all together. Where Talon has that dream. It's the same dream Anakin said, to Qui-Gon. And except in this situation, Anakin's the older boy. And his youthful idealism is a little cooled because of the trauma of the loss of Qui-Gon Jinn and the separation from his mother. So, here you have Talon who echoes the sentiment, I want to see them all. And so the two kind of bond over that. And so, in a way, Obi-Wan is now father to 2 boys. But he's got to try to balance them. And of course you have Ferris Olin, who Anakin despises, whom Siri takes on as her apprentice, and Obi-Wan always feels a certain sense of kinship with. So now you have essentially Ferris is the oldest, you have Anakin is the middle child, and we put in a youngest child. So you have these three boys. You've got, weirdly, Ferris and Anakin who despise each other. You have Tahlon, the youngest, constantly thrust and pulled between the two, having to basically play mediator. From the moment he's about, 9 years old. And this will shape him and mold him into the man he'll later be. Now, we then came to the notion, well, who will train Tahlon? And that's where we came up with a master, a Sullustan who's losing his eyesight, an elderly guy from Dooku's generation. And yeah, we kind of were stretching it there. I know, just suspension of disbelief, people. But then we asked ourselves, why would this old man even want to train this boy? So we developed for him a backstory. And with him, we decided that he was a Jedi master from Dooku's generation. He had quite a bit of success behind him. But as he began to lose his eyesight and his health began to decline, he became less and less of a force of nature. So he's getting old. But he's also a well-honed investigator. And he took an interest in, of course, Obi-Wan and Siri, if more a mild one. And in the prologue we wrote, he's always just cropping up in the background. More just people are sending him out on errands because, he needs stuff to do. He's helping in the archives. He notices Tahlon. And he starts to take an interest in him. But he notices a discrepancy. The DNA files of Tahlon in the Jedi Temple and on Coruscant state he's the son of Owen Kenobi. The Republican files on Coruscant connect his DNA to Obi-Wan Kenobi and Siri Tachi. A bit of a foolish mistake on Obi-Wan's part. And this master noticed this and discovered this by accident and began to become suspicious. Well, why didn't he report the two? The idea was that he was a master who had reported his own... Well, his Padawan had a love affair. He had reported her. And the end result was she was ordered to break up with her boyfriend. And we decided she reacted in a melodramatic manner by committing suicide. And he found his own Padawan hanging in her own quarters. And this traumatized this old man, this old Sullustan. So this old Sullustan decided, I'm never reporting anyone to Yoda, because he did consult with Yoda afterwards and said, my Padawan committed suicide. I must have made a mistake. And Yoda said, no, you did the right thing. Then why is she dead? Why was she hanging in her quarters? You have to let go of the loss. She made her decision. But to him, that's kind of cold, because that was that was essentially his daughter. So we kind of had the mentality, why wouldn't he report Obi-Wan and Siri? Because he's afraid. He's afraid of reporting anyone. So, these sort of mistakes shatter people's confidence. So it shattered this Sullustan's confidence. And he decided to offer himself up as a temporary master for Tahlon. Because he wants one last Padawan as well. He's like, I want one last student. I want one throw of the dice to get it right this time. Because my last Padawan, I failed. So I must do it right this time. And so he takes on Tahlon as his Padawan. We named him, ironically, after Chiron from Greek mythology, except we named him Kyrus, I think it was. Yes, Kyrus. But he's about 82 or 83. He's old. Not much use in a fight. So he's, of course, going to die. At the outset of the Clone Wars. I know that's a lot. That's a huge info dump, right, Chris?
That I'm piecing it all together. But, I mean, you have a lot of even this Kyrus character, he has his own backstory. And it's like a web that you've already constructed that's very detailed. So I think there's a lot of meat here. There's a lot of interesting background in each character. So I think it's interesting to me. The aspect of the characters relationships between the Jedi, yeah, it was a big thing in Knights of the Old Republic, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't big in a lot of the, honestly, I would say just like a lot of the mainstream or movies, I would say you don't see that. Relationships and from the Jedi. Get a little bit of it from Han and Leia is the big one, right?
Yeah. With good reason.
Anakin and Padme. But because we see that it's bad. It seems bad. Like it seems to be a lesson that these relationships are fatal for a Jedi.
Well,
maybe that's wrongly concluded, but it could be seen that way.
Well, I will argue the Leia-Han relationship is nothing but good.
But they were... I guess what I'm coming from is that them not being Jedi, though.
Well, Leia becomes a Jedi before she's 30, so...
but in the movies... Sorry, I'm talking purely from movies perspective.
Yeah.
She wasn't really... I mean, they do give us her Jedi training, right, in the sequels, but if you just want to talk about, like, the original trilogy, it wasn't really...
Yeah,
they weren't really there yet.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. And we knew we had to build relationships between characters, but we didn't just want it to be sex. So we had to build friendships and rivalries, characters who like each other, characters who don't like each other. Tahlon himself, for example, is selected to be a Padawan, right? But his friend Yvek-Leba, the Twi'lek, the idea with her was that she had a good shot maybe if Qui-Gon had lived. And at least she thought she did. Because Qui-Gon kind of doted on her. Because Qui-Gon was always a sucker for doting on little girls. Because he's a lot like Wolverine. He's very gentle that way. I really like Qui-Gon. But the thing is, Yvek does not have a master who chooses her. So she's sent out because of the age of 13. Tahlon...
So if you don't get selected by the age of 13, then you're expelled from the order? Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's a thing. Yoda instituted that rule.
Of course.
Actually, it created a lot of Darksiders. A lot of gangsters. They were typically thrown into the Agricorps, but most ran away and became bounty hunters, gangsters, politicians, Darksiders. The thing is, apparently...
Makes for a good plot mechanic, though.
Yeah, and apparently a lot of Sith cults like to go and go through the list of expelled students and say, yeah, we're going to go for him. We just need to send one of our recruiters to this area. Him, her. Yeah, okay. They treated it like a recruitment drive. And the thing is, Yoda, to my understanding, doesn't seem to have done anything to resolve the problem of disappearing initiates, because his mentality was, once you're out of the order, you're not his problem anymore. He doesn't have to keep track of you anymore. You go to Agricorps, you're not, seriously, not my problem. Out of sight, out of mind. And that's what happened to Dooku.
He's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, Yoda, in his defense, had a lot of responsibilities, and keeping track of every initiate that went off on to the Agricorps.
Okay, yeah, it is a fair point. My solution would be not to send them out, but
I agree.
But the thing is, Yoda feared beefing up the Jedi numbers too much. Otherwise, like what happened in every other era, someone would turn to the dark side. But, because it increases the chances. But actually, what we know is that it doesn't, because someone's always going to turn to the dark side. You know what I mean? But the difference is that if you train a larger number, you have more potential Jedi who can stop the Darksider. By decreasing the number of Jedi, you decrease the chances you have of stopping the Darksider. You see what I mean? Yoda's kind of... Yeah, I think Yoda's looking at it as a glass half empty thing, and I'm looking at it as half full.
Weren't there in the Knights of the Old Republic Force sensitives that the Jedi employed, but did not give... What were they called? Do you guys remember? Or did they have a name specifically?
I think Force Adepts.
Force Adepts, yeah. So they had a use for them in the Order when they had these large armies. Maybe that was a different story.
Yeah, and we got to bear in mind, in Yoda's time, there are Jedi cults. There's thousands of cults. It's not just the Sith or whomever that are using it as a recruitment drive. You have a lot of Jedi cults saying, oh, this guy is, dead last in Yoda's class. Oh, let's recruit him. Maybe he can join us. We can make a proper Jedi out of him. So, a lot of good came out of this. A lot of bad came out of this. It's like anything in life. And our idea was, Tahlon was chosen, Yvek-Leba wasn't. But the trouble is, Yvek-Leba ended up joining the Agricorps, but the person, her manager in Agricorps, tried to basically sell her, despite her being a little girl. She got sold to her home planet of Ryloth, to a gangster. And the idea was, however, she was freed by Twi'lek, that we decided to bring in a... Because the Twi'leks in KOTOR are more like... well, they're not all slaves. So Ryloth was a force once, but it declined after KOTOR. We noticed that, and we said, well, what would it take to bring it back? So we then went into that rabbit hole, because why not? We're going into every rabbit hole. We then decided to make a senator who's a fiery one, like who's basically inspired by Bishop Lamberton, I think it is, from Scottish history, who felt that the Scottish crown is not owed in allegiance and whatnot to anyone save God. So, like, no one owns the crown of Scotland except God himself. So, okay, we now have a senator. And the idea was to create someone who would help Yvette, free her, but Yvette would then become a bodyguard for her. But the idea was that Tahlon and Kairos would end up on a mission, but Yvette would be killed in the mission. Tahlon would, of course, care a great deal for her, and would be very upset with this death. And this would then mold and shape his outlook. Where before he thought, like every Jedi, attachments are evil. But Anakin and Obi-Wan were always telling him, no, they're not. And Tahlon then ends up asking Yoda, like, why do we even have this rule? Yoda tells him, it's there for a reason. And Yoda's like, well, I like this rule. I'm not gonna reform the order. And Talanis says, yeah, but my friend died. Like, and at least a rule of 13 has to go. Yoda's gonna say, no, it's there for a reason. And this is where Tahlon starts to move away from Yoda. Like, he liked him originally, but then he comes to dislike him. So now we have a bit of a, I don't want to say rivalry, but a dislike of sorts. Yoda still cares deeply for Tahlon. Tahlon, however, has a loathing for Yoda and regards him as a green troll. And he doesn't really like him. Here, and this is where Tahlon is a lot like Dooku. So Dooku's essentially his great-grandfather. So Talon's kind of taking after great-grandpa a little. So, because we kind of saw it as adoptive family is still family. So there's traits that are maybe not genetic, but at least being passed down. So that Tahlon is a weird mixture of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Siri, and Dooku. And the other thing we had the thought of is that over the years, Tahlon, who is obsessed with the Darth Maul fight, just like Anakin, and who watches that recording over and over again, Tahlon decides to build for himself a different kind of lightsaber than what most Jedi would. He comes to believe that Qui-Gon was the greatest, and the only reason Maul won was because Maul had a cheat, a double-sided lightsaber. So Tahlon builds one. And the thing is, his single hilt was destroyed at one point on a mission, so he builds himself a new double-sided lightsaber. And on a later mission, a Mandalorian warrior, a female Mandalorian warrior, will destroy that lightsaber. So he then begins to scavenge the galaxy for a stronger steel, Mandalorian steel, and forges for himself a double-sided lightsaber using that, because Mandalorian steel can resist lightsabers. It's nigh on indestructible. But it doesn't turn it off like Cortosis does. So he's got this very strong double-sided lightsaber. And it's blue, because of course it's blue. But the thing is, even with this sort of lightsaber, Tahlon never, ever, ever wins a lightsaber duel, even in sparring with Anakin. But for Anakin, it allows him to kind of exorcise his demon, Maul. So Anakin comes to know how to fight this sort of lightsaber, which we thought would be an interesting thing. On the other hand, Tahlon has become very close to his master. And when the time comes for Episode 2, Tahlon is already on a mission in a nearby space sector. He's gung-ho to go, join in. He wants to join in. He wants to rush to the rescue of his best friend Anakin and his father figure Obi-Wan. He's obsessed with it. But the thing is, Mace's message to gather those Jedi in the temple and those he can on the way to Geonosis is heard. Kairos refuses to allow Tahlon to join in. He forbids it and tells Tahlon, we have very delicate negotiations on the planet we're on. That's your job. you're going to keep doing this. And, Tahlon is a hothead. And he says, why should I? I got to go help. But he's not able to, and he's abandoned on the planet by his master, because his master sees it as, I'm going to take the only ship out of here. You're staying. Stay. You're grounded. So, because Kyrus leaves him, Talon's stuck, dealing with the negotiations. Kyrus goes to Geonosis, thinking, I'm 83, I've lived my life, But the thing is, Kyrus falls to the droids on Geonosis in the arena. Because we felt that some of our if we're sending him there, he shouldn't survive, because a lot of Jedi die in the arena, so Kyrus must die. His eyes fail him, and he fails to block a blaster bolt properly. And he bleeds out, staring up at the suns, as the battle then moves elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a good way to make him go out. It reminds me of... Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. One thing it would remind me of was how Dooku apparently adopted a different lightsaber form that was better for dueling.
Dooku.
And most Jedi of the time...
Mugashi.
Yeah, Dooku.
Yeah.
Okay. And most of the Jedi at that time were... Their main form, or their primary form, was meant to deflect droid... Or blaster fire.
Yeah, Niman.
Okay.
Form 6. And a lot of them also used Form 1, Shicho, the basic style.
Mm-hmm.
Our idea was, I think Kyrus was a master of, I think it was Form 4. Ataru, the same style as Yoda or Luke, because he's shorter. Tahlon, because he has, this massive force potential, relied on Ataru, or at least the double-sided lightsaber version. Maul uses a double-sided lightsaber version of Form 7. Tahlon uses Form 4 because he thinks, I've got, I want to be able to beat my enemy into submission with the Force and use acrobatics and look cool doing it. I'm being sardonic here. But the idea was, we decided that, we didn't write it yet, but Kyrus, we would have written it that as he's bleeding out, he has the sun fought, he feels sad that he's dying. He's like, oh, I wish I hadn't come. I'm proud that I came. I'm glad I came to help Obi-Wan, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to him. He's the father of my apprentice. I love Obi-Wan dearly. I admire him. He's a better Jedi than I could ever be. But, I kind of would have liked to die in my bed. He has this spot in his head. He's like... And we wanted to put in a bit of tragedy. But as he lies dying, he hears the voice, and he's like, but I don't deserve that. I drove my apprentice to suicide. I was a horrible master. I failed her. But he hears the voice of his former Padawan, and she lulls him to sleep as he lies dying. So we thought that was a bit of a mercy on our part.
Yeah,
but
that's sweet.
His lightsaber is then picked up by someone who has a droid-like shape. General Grievous. Yeah, we thought that was pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we figured his lightsaber would go on to be used to kill other Jedi. And it's a green lightsaber, because green for Jedi is the color of serenity. So, at least from what I've noticed, all green lightsaber-wielding Jedi are serene. All blue-wielding Jedi are very concerned with righteousness and justice. So, we kind of connected the dots on that one. And we figured that, Tahlon, it should be blue, so he doesn't stand out at all. His master had green, and Grievous should get the lightsaber. Because we wanted to find a way to get one lightsaber to Grievous, and also tell the backstory of the Jedi whose lightsaber Grievous stole. So we kind of got
trying to think of who the other green lightsaber wielders were. Sorry, is that what, Qui-Gon green?
Yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn is green. Luke Skywalker is green. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, Obi-Wan being blue. I was just checking. I did some mental checks.
Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of looked at that and we thought, Of course, we also ended up asking ourselves, what about the Mandalorian who destroyed Talon's first lightsaber? The female one. Because we wanted it to be a female Mandalorian because, Tor had that really cool female Mandalorian at the beginning in that intro thing. So why not use a character like that? And since Talon's not going to be the greatest warrior of all times, we decided a Mandalorian should smash his first lightsaber. So we then decided on a lark to give her the same name as him, except a slightly different twist on it, Talanis. And we then decided, because I think Dan liked Harry Potter at the time. No, our oldest brother thought it was funny to give a Harry Potter name as a surname or a Mandalorian clan name. So it was Salazzar he selected. After, I think, some ancient wizard from Harry Potter.
Salazar Slytherin?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, so there's a big joke in there that Chris,
Nice.
our oldest brother, came up with for the character. So we had Talanis Salazzar. And the idea was this would be a brutal, young female Mandalorian who's like half the age of Jango, but almost as brutal as Jango Fett. And we decided she would be on Kamino, training some of the clones. But she's one of the only ones, like Jango, who kind of knows about Dooku and Tyrannus. And when she hears, Jedi Master Yoda's on the way. Now, she has a criminal record. She's wanted throughout the galaxy. She decides to hightail it. She books it. I only bring her up because she'll be important later.
Okay.
Because we decided we wanted some heroes on Dooku's side. And some major characters on Dooku's side who are named characters. We also decided that because in the comics there's mention of Jedi who chose to side with Dooku against the Order, we would grab some Jedi, because we had developed some other secondary characters. Like Melira had her own master. We decided he'd be a Trandoshan, just for fun. I know a lot of this sounds random, like, it's just for fun. So we had a Trandoshan master, Dariel was his name, and Dariel, or Master Farron, because Farrell was the word we used, but we decided to put an N instead of an L at the end, Farron. But we decided that, how would Tahlon develop his double-sided lightsaber skills and know how to build it? Well, this Trandoshan had one, and passed the secret to him, even though they're not Master and Padawan, and he trained him a little. But this Trandoshan was someone we decided would be someone who would side with Dooku. Then we had to come up with, why would he side with Dooku? Well, we then decided he should be someone who advocates for attachments openly. Now, Obi-Wan Kenobi is someone who advocates for attachments, but not openly. Obi-Wan is pretending to be a traditionalist. He's pretending to be someone who agrees with Yoda that attachments are bad. Even as Obi-Wan plans and schemes that when he becomes Grand Master, he'll reform and remove that rule. That is something that's written even into the Episode 3 novel, I believe. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. It's been years. But that's implied in several of the EU novels. And Mace has implied that he knows that's Obi-Wan's plan, but doesn't have a problem with it. He doesn't have a bone of contention with it. He doesn't care. To Mace, what's important is the Order survives intact. Now, the problem is Dariel wants to hit it with, he sees this small nail and wants to hit it with a jackhammer. And Yoda, of course, says no. No, I'm not reforming the Order. No. Dariel keeps insisting over the years, and eventually he just leaves in a huff. He's one of the Jedi who agrees to follow Dooku. So now we have a named Jedi, but he's not a Darksider, he's a Lightsider, but he blindly believes in Dooku. Foolishly. And we just wanted, because like I said, in a few comics it's mentioned there are Jedi who side with Dooku. But we never really get any real named character, so we wanted a named character. And this is a guy that Tahlon, even Anakin, they can probably get along with. The idea is that even though he's left the Order, his mentality is, I still can't fight Jedi. I'm not going to kill a Jedi. So, whenever he's confronted with another Jedi, he says, I will not fight you. He's willing to retreat. He's willing to run away. He's not willing to give the order to blast the enemy ship because, Jedi. But ultimately, this gets him captured at one point because he has no place to run, so of course he's going to end up captured. Because he has his rule, I don't kill Jedi. I don't fight Jedi. We're brothers. We're sisters. But ultimately, he is also Melira's master. And you have Padawan on one side in the war, Master on the other. And so you have a drama there. And we were going to write chapters involving this because it gives us another fresh perspective in the Clone Wars. And it's exciting drama. Because both Master and Apprentice are lightsiders. Darial does not know Dooku is Tyrannus. But he believes Dooku's lies that, or at least maybe not a lie, I should say, that Darth Sidious controls the Senate. Darial believes that. He believes Dooku. He likes Dooku. He looks up to him, like a lot of Jedi do. So now we've explained why a lightsider would side with Dooku. Dooku's supposed to be charismatic, so this heightens his charisma, his influence over Jedi. Even as there's drama on the Jedi side, because you have a master who's broken off with his Padawan. And so you've got this Padawan who's struggling with, why did my master abandon the Republic? And this shatters a lot of illusions and beliefs she has. Why did he abandon us? And you have on the master's end, he saw it as, I had to. I don't believe in the Republic anymore. I don't believe that Jedi Order is functioning the way it should. It should be a check on the Republic, not an enabler. So you have this kind of conflict. But Malira will never go over to the CIS side. Ever. So, ultimately, you have this drama between Master and Apprentice. And because Darial will never strike a Jedi, not even in self-defense, we had thought that Anakin would be one of them that would help capture him, but Anakin is not able to bring himself to hurt him. Because this shows Anakin's gentler side, and why Padme thought Anakin was gentle. Because we wanted to use also our characters in the situations they're in to prove, to kind of give, I don't want to say exposition, but lore behind why characters believe or say things about Obi-Wan or Anakin that's a certain, just to help it make sense. Like I said, and even you said, Chris, we have this huge web which is just out of control. Because, we're fantasy writers, so we see a molehill, we can't help but dig and burrow in. And we then go freaking nuts. And then we go, wait, hold on. And I remember a friend once saying, whoa, hold on. I thought Anakin was the main character of your story, yeah? Who's this fucking Fergus guy? Well, Fergus is this guy who dealt with abuse from his master, and why should I care? What does that have to do with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker? I don't know. That was my honest response. I don't know. And then why include him? I couldn't resist, was the response. But we then I ended up saying, well, okay, for Fergus, what's the even freaking point of having this character? Well, I like Sturm Brightblade from Dragonlance. I want Sturm in Star Wars. So I'm going to give Fergus the same personality as Sturm Brightblade. There. This friend, yeah, but... Okay, so he's Sturm. What's the point? So then I had to... Well, our oldest brother came up. He helped come up with a lot. He said, I have the solution. If there's a Valley of the Jedi, from the old Sith, the new Sith Wars, right? What if there's a Valley of the Sith? And of course, we then get excited about that, and we then construct a story for that, and we decide, well, where's the map? Well, Fergus's father had the map, but he didn't realize it was a map. He had a star map of sorts, and we got inspired by Treasure Planet, and we decided, okay, that there should be a map like that that's basically handed down across this family, and it has been for generations. And the idea then was, Fergus did not inherit it, though. His sister did. Well, why does he have a sister? Well, because we need someone to inherit this freaking star map. So now we have a reason for a raison d'etre for Fergus. So he's important because he's from a lineage of people who've kept this bloody star map. This galactic map. And I know people are going to say, you guys went into too many rabbit holes. I know. We did. We just can't help it. But the thing is, this is where we ran into a problem. As we were progressing through the Clone Wars, we were mapping out the plot outlines. We were like, okay, Fergus is going to get a lot of war stories. Tahlon is going to get commando stories, because we played Republic Commando, and we said, you know what, it'd be boring if everybody was a Jedi General. We want him to be Tahlon, after the death of his master, is kind of traumatized and shocked, because, he's like, I should have been there. So he hates being on the command bridge. He wants to be in person. So the problem is, because now Palpatine needs him to have a clone commander assigned to him, for Order 66. And our idea was that, well, Tahlon is not interested in that. So he keeps slipping away. He doesn't want to lead from a bridge, which is not very good leadership in some ways. But then there's the idea supplied by the Jedi. Why don't we just assign him a clone commando unit? That's where, yes, we get into the clones. We decided to assign him a clone unit. But we decided it could not be Delta Squad, because Delta Squad's too important. They're too awesome. They deserve better. And so we did not like Omega Squad, because Karen Travis sucks. So we had to come up with our own clone commando squad. We called it Alpha Squad. But then we just had to come up with the personalities for them and the names. So, of course, this is where I forget what the numbers were that we gave them. So we gave them the clone names. Let me try to remember them. There was Nate, who was the explosives expert. There was Zuko, who was the weapons teammate. There was Wyatt, he was the computer expert. And you had Quinn's. Oh, right, because he was 1515. Clone Commando 1515. 1515. So Quinn's. Canes. From French, because we're French. And the thing is, we decided they're assigned to Tahlon. So he's got a clone commando unit. Not an entire legion. So, we decided that would be his role. And I think we've gotten all the way up to the Clone Wars. I think that's all we can do for this podcast because we've gone on long enough.
That's a good start, though. I think that is a good place to stop because I think we've set up a lot, right?
Yeah. But we have to be honest. Like, as much as we've created all these bloody webs, we actually decided when we got to, when we were outlining, when we got to episode 3, we were like, okay, we're just going to kill almost everyone because screw these webs. Screw these webs. We don't want them no more. So, yeah, most of these webs end in death because why the heck not? Why you should care about them, I don't know. But the idea was, though, that we gave each character a distinctive personality. Fergus is a depressed individual. He suffers from chronic depression. He was basically abused as a Padawan. But he's very close to Yoda. Him and Yoda are like grandfather and grandson. They love each other deeply. And it wounds Yoda to see this young man with so much talent and potential so broken and aged before his time. Fergus is a man who never really knew joy in his life. He's best friends with Tahlon. He loves Tahlon. But he's not a happy person by nature. But Fergus also is the only Jedi to kind of almost get a prophecy of his own death. He's got an inkling he will die in this war. He has this... He doesn't see it clearly, but he knows I die at the end of this war. And so we were kind of wanting to go there, with the idea, what if someone did have a sense they were going to die in this war? And, we were kind of deciding, why not have this great warrior who's like Sturm, who's been depressed his entire life, and he has the foreknowledge, I will die. What would that do to such a person psychologically? So we also wanted to do that sort of thing. Malira is a girl who has a talent for prophecy. But she also dreams of being a medic. But the thing is, at the outset of the war, she fails disastrously on the first clone mission she's assigned. She's a hothead. As we saw, she has a potty mouth. But she then struggles with the fact that she's kind of mediocre in lightsaber skills. She uses Jarkai, 2 lightsabers. But she's middling compared to Anakin and Tahlon. So she's kind of subpar. But she's a jack of all trades. She's a decent pilot, she's a decent medic, she's a decent seeress, she's a decent this, she's a decent that. She never excelled. So she's suffering from, I guess you could say, what is it? Not envy, but she's self-conscious about her middling skills, and she's impulsive. She charges in without always thinking things through.
She had something to prove.
Yeah, good way of putting it. Mikran is gentle. She doesn't actually want to fight. Mikran is horrified to be thrust into a war. She does not wish to fight or war. Malira is much fiercer than her. The two are basically twins without being twins. They've been together since they were in the crib. And the thing is, they've never been separated, and suddenly they're separated. And McCran just doesn't know how to fight, I guess you could say, on a psychological level. So for her, war is not a good idea. She wanted to be teaching in the temple, but she's told, you have 2 lightsabers, because she also uses Jerkai. We set up Mikran and Malira as mirror images to each other. And Mikran is just like, I don't want to go out there, but she has to. So she's basically drafted. But she likes flowers, she likes gardening, she likes the younglings. So it's like someone who's a trad wife, but is drafted.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
Not
Aunt May. What?
Said not a good fit.
No. But it's not like, say, Yoda's fault or something. Yoda, like, Dan and I had agreed, Yoda would be horrified at having to send her up. But do they have a choice? No.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, like, you know, like, what can you do? Like, Talon, Malira, Fergus, they're gung-ho for this. Anakin's gung-ho for this. McCran's like, keep me out of this. But she ends up traumatized by the war. Because, you know, PTSD. It's a thing. As for Gurion, the Wookiee, him and Talon had... Well, we had the thought... Gurion hated Talon for a time because he blamed Devek's death on Talon. And Gurion, the Wookiee, and Talon would kind of, over the course of the war, start off hating each other. Or at least Gurion hated Talon. Talon felt bad and couldn't bear to look Gurion in the eye. But as the war would progress, they kind of become friends. So Gurion's a hothead, and he holds a grudge. And he's a Jedi. But underneath it all, he's still that's the kind of Wookiee that Chewbacca is. At his core, he's good. So these are our invented cast members. I don't know if they're as deep as these actual Star Wars characters. I don't know.
I think they seem pretty deep.
Okay.
Do you think that they... does this... like, would you... Are you hoping that this is characterized as having a large cast with lots of characters and lots of deep characters, or is it just that every character that you want to be in the book, even if they're a side character, even if they're less important, that they're very well fleshed out, or is it maybe a combination?
Combination, right, Dan?
Yeah, because one thing I couldn't help but think was that we are fantasy writers. And yes, this is a science fiction universe. However, we wouldn't have been able to extrapolate this much if George Lucas did not take a more fantasy writer mentality and approach to writing Star Wars.
Yeah, because everybody in the Tatooine Mos Eisley Tavern has this deep, interesting backstory. And every single one of the bounty hunters assembled before Vader has his own novel at some point, I think.
Right.
And it's like, George started this. We just simply said, well, we got to bear in mind, what would George do? What would Lucas do? Well, okay. Then we actually had like this, I think we had a board at one point. All right, so this character, we wrote his name. All right, how does he connect to him? And how does he... And it was just this, it was a mess. And then we were like, shit. Sorry to cuss. It's like, shoot. And
you can cuss. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. It's just we're like, oh, crap. We overdid it. And the trouble, another reason we stopped writing this fanfic was because before we even wrote, like, we had all the plot outlines all the way up to, what was it? The sequel era. But the problem was, before we even made it to the Clone Wars, we were like, wait, won't we have to write this character, or this story, or that story, or this interstory? Oh, right, and we also need to do this. We also need... It got to be too big, and we couldn't write it. And we were like, well, we'll either have to spend all our time writing this or our fantasy stories. We'll just write our fantasy stories. And so this kind of got, I guess, thrown aside. But cast of characters was large. We were hoping they were all deeply fleshed out. We were also hoping that if we could have legacy characters to an extent. But we wanted our legacy characters to feel natural. Au naturel, so to speak. But... we kind of also looked at, like, say, ideas amongst the clones, and we were like, well, it was our oldest brother, though, who came up with one plot thread, all on his own, and he said, what happens if when did Order 66 get put in as an order? Well, it was not there at Kamino, because Palpatine changed the orders. There was 150 orders, and they were changed. Palpatine event said, these are the official 150 orders. Then he secretly had them changed and distributed Order 66. And the Jedi weren't paying attention because they had a war to fight. Well, our brother Chris then said, what would happen if a clone army was separated for a time, like for a few months, from upper command, survived for a while, and made it all the way back to Coruscant? And then they suddenly were slapped with these orders. But by then they had to learn independence and free will. And he's like, you basically have an entire army of what the clones would call indies. That is to say, clones with defective loyalty genes. So we kind of then got into that rabbit hole as well. We got into just rabbit holes. And this is the scene we're kind of setting with the Clone Wars. We have a lot of rabbits we were chasing, and there were too many. We even came up with the idea, what if we had a character modeled after Dinobot from Beast Wars as a Sith rival? Because to some of the characters, we wanted to juxtapose him against, let's say, Anakin. Because we were like, we want someone who will be a... Because we want more Sith. We want more lightsaber guys on the CIS side. We need more Sith Lords. So why not... But I was reading Darth Bane at the time, and I said, wait, there are Sith who believe in honor? How about what if one of those guys became a Sith? And so, what if there was a Sith like that? And so we basically said, well, let's look up Sith cults. So we looked up a few, and we said, okay, well, there's enough of them running around. So now we have Sith, and we decided his name would be, what was it? Malignus, because malignant. And we set him up as a kind of Dinobot-like character. He has that honor code. But yeah, so we put a few extra Sith on the opposite, on Dooku's side, because why not? So on the dark side, we just wanted there to be more Sith, so our Jedi could, and Obi-Wan and Anakin can kill them, because Anakin is supposed to be the Sith, the guy who kills a lot of Sith Lords, a lot of Darksiders, and then he becomes one. This is his story. So this is what we also threw in there. I don't know if that's crazy or stupid, but people can dislike it if they want.
I like it. I like having more Sith because the droids aren't very interesting.
No, but the idea here is though is that we're going with the expanded universe and the role-playing games, because we have all those games. They're Sith cults. So these are not officially Sith in a way. You know what I mean? They are Sith, but they're not. The idea is they are not part of the Darth Bane order. They're part of other cults and orders, because there are those out there. But they are not part of the rule of two. So they're used as pawns and puppets by Palpatine and Dooku. They're disposable. And they will be disposed of later. Make no mistake. For the most part, they will be. And that was our kind of idea. So that's the stage we set. A lot of Sith cults and a few Jedi siding with Dooku. The Jedi cults and the Jedi Order, with the Republic. So the stage is set, and we've Anakin with a full cast around him. And then we'll get a little into the Clone Wars, hopefully, if you want, next time. And we'll talk about how we plan to slaughter our cast of characters.
That'll be a good next episode.
Okay.
I think I have a few questions. Maybe one.
Okay.
I would ask that maybe you don't answer it today. Maybe we save it for part 2. But I'm curious if there's going to be more switching sides by the Jedi and the Sith, since I think that when you have these characters that have developed relationships since childhood, what would happen if one of them decided to turn Sith? Would that one of their, since some of these relationships are so deep, would they switch with them, or would they become enemies, or
okay. You're guessing half the plot.
So I don't want to. So then don't answer. We can talk about it next time. That's a good tease. We got to tease the audience.
We'd be spoiling way too much if we answered that question.
I think half our cast, which, oh my gosh. Okay. You guessed a lot.
Okay. Well, it was just it makes the drama. I was I'm hoping that's going to happen, because otherwise, it would make for a lot of drama and heart-wrenching moments. So.
Yeah, you guessed almost everything. There's a lot. It's pretty predictable, isn't it?
Well, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's very true. What's your
Because
next
you
question?
said, like you talked about in one of your recent posts, it's like a storytelling itself, and you said that a lot of the characters, you're just like, I can't stop writing them, and maybe that's just like, it's just part of you that's just needs to come out. It needs to be expressed in this fanfic, in this book.
Yeah.
So, very good job. I mean, I like it. I want to see more of it in writing. I'm like, okay, can I remember this character and who they relate to and who's their father and who's their love interest? So there's a lot to remember, but that also is what makes people that like reading books interested in them.
Maybe a glossary of characters would be a good idea.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just the only thing. It's just from audio, like how I learn. It's easier when I'm reading it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
But
on the same
to
way.
discuss it,
Yeah.
I'm still understanding. I still understand though. But like you said, it is a character web. So
Yeah, we'd have to do a glossary. Maybe we'll do that in over the next week or two, and we'll submit it to you, and you could post that with the podcast.
Well, it would be fun too. It would be fun to just have that as a piece of content for you and I. It could be a fun way to like you said, it could be a fun complement to the episode.
Okay.
This is very character driven anyway, so even just people to read like a synopsis of the characters could be fun.
Yeah.
And maybe that would get people more interested, and learning more about your story, because you're like, who are all these characters and how are they going to work into this?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, we'll do that for you. Yeah, and it could be posted in accompaniment with the episodes, and this way it gives you a little more content. And yeah, and Dan and I could maybe try analyzing the themes and whatnot, and the motifs of our own kind of weird ideas, and then just link it to your excellent podcast, and this way we direct more people towards you.
And I hope likewise.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, not right now. I think I'm excited to hear about part 2. I feel like you guys have set up a good story, so I'm just excited to hear more, and I'm glad that you guys got an opportunity to get it hopefully out into the world a bit. Yeah, it's also, this is fun for me because I don't know a lot about this side of the EU, just to admit, just to say quite frankly. So I'm like, I want to read some of the source material or some of the inspiration to.
Well, a lot of our ideas will also, by the time we get to the original era, be tying in with the Jedi Knight series with Kyle Katarn, because we're big fanboys of him. He's probably one of my favorite characters. So we want to get into him. We want to get into Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Leia Solo. We really want to get into these characters. So, but we're like, we can't just start in the OT era. You have to start in the prequel era and slowly weave the web, the thread. You know what I mean? And I want to just end my part of this with saying, don't worry, everyone. We will not have a single character outshine Obi-Wan or Anakin or Mace or something. We're going to make damn sure that the characters who get, the coolest moments, the best moments, are primarily the main cast. And the idea is not to supplant, but to kind of create followers. Not leaders, but followers around these characters, for the most part. And the idea is to, yes, we'll change a few things later on, but like I said, our main goal here is that we want Anakin and Obi-Wan to look cooler.
The one thing we had to do is to make sure that we do not counter the lore. We don't go at odds with the laws and the rules of the Jedi Order or the Force, the Senate. We cannot go against that.
Yeah. So ultimately what happens is that our characters have to fail, basically, in the prequel era. And we can't have as many characters in the original era. We just can't. Because, it doesn't make any sense if we do. So, we gotta... Yeah, so it's funny because we came up with so many ideas for the prequel era and we were able to compress them probably in just 2 episodes. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, this is great. Really enjoyed what you guys have shared so far. A lot of interesting characters. Like that you started out with the childhood and working your way up from there. I think that's a little bit different than how some people would approach it, especially in Star Wars. So
okay,
that's
really don't
pretty
know.
cool. I just haven't read a lot of books that started out talking about childhood. So I think that could be a unique angle.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for giving
Could
us a
be wrong.
platform to get it off our chest.
And thanks for coming on. And where can people find you guys? Just as a reminder, if you've listened this far, you've definitely got to go check out the Brothers Krynn Substack. So
That's primarily where we can be found. We do all sorts of essays and theses, mostly about literature and movies. For Sci Friday, that is to say Fridays, we typically analyze things like Treasure Planet, Star Wars, so Star Wars fans are very welcome.
can't forget.
And but on Wednesday, I'm trying to get it working on it for Tuesdays, but soon it'll be Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Well, we'll have Dan and my serial fiction. That is to say, our fantasy novels and stories. French ones will be on, because we're French, will be on hopefully Tuesdays and also Fridays. It's already on. A lot of stories are published on Fridays. English stories are available on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So you could check for yourselves to see if you think our prose is any good, if our stories are any good for yourself. And we would urge everyone to also subscribe to Chris's channel in Substack because, your own platform is pretty awesome.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate that.
No problem. You do a lot more Star Wars content than what we're able to. So that's something we really deeply, deeply appreciate. As I don't know about others, but like every once in a while, you get a fix. Like you need a fix, like a drug or something, I don't know. And your Substack's kind of the thing that helps to, Star Wars loose canon, your podcast, your stuff kind of helps to, how do I put it? Scratch that itch.
Yeah, we all have it. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, guys, thanks again for coming on to this episode, coming on to the show. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. Like we said, check out the Brothers Krynn Substack. And may the Force be with you. We will see you all next time.
And may the Schwartz be with you all.
Bye now.